Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Creating a Great Tone for the Fractal FM3. I've had a bunch of questions since releasing my first couple videos about the Fractal FM3, and I've had some folks asking me how I would go about creating a preset with scenes and channels. So I figured I would do a quick video about it. This is probably something a lot of folks already know, but for anybody new to the FM3 and wanting to maybe just have a different take possibly than some others on how these features can be used, because they can be used in a number of really great ways. And the features are really well thought out, very impressed with how they work. But I thought I would go about and show you how I would approach it. Now, having said that, there's so many different ways to work, and there's no, nobody can say there's one right or wrong way to work. It's really going to come down to whatever works best for our situation and our ideals. So having said that, let's talk first about what scenes and channels are. We have the ability to have up to 8 scenes in the Fractal FM3, which means that's going to kind of store data such as what blocks are going to be turned on or off or in bypass or engaged. So for instance, if I had one scene where I wanted a reverb on, I could have the reverb turned on in scene number 1. When I switch to scene number 2, I disengage that. So every time I switch between scene number 1 and scene number 2, which effects are going to be engaged or bypassed. So that's one use of it. Now you might say, well, what are channels? I like to think of channels much like we would channels on a multi-channel guitar head. Let's say we have a guitar amp that has 3 different channels, clean, rhythm and lead, or clean overdrive and lead. We can almost think of this feature as such. And within the channels, we can either change the entire amplifier model we're using out, let's say if we're talking about the amp block, or we could just change specific parameters within the same amp model that we have stored. And this goes for all of our blocks, whether we talk overdrive pedals, delays. If we have one particular tape type delay on one channel and we want something more like a digital delay on another channel, we can actually make that switch. So really interesting stuff, and I think you'll understand it more as I dive into it. But now, having said about these different ways of working, I know some folks like this idea of, for their clean sounds, maybe having one amp that sort of takes care of their clean sounds. And then when they switch, they want to go to, maybe for a heavy sound, an amp that's going to do a very specific heavy sound. And that's a great way to work. And I would never say that somebody shouldn't work like that. If that's what works for you, that's wonderful. For myself, it's kind of funny, and maybe just coming from many, many years of playing live and in the studio with, maybe say plugged into one particular amp, I always liked sort of the cohesiveness, let's call it, of getting an amp that I could kind of get good clean sounds, good edge of breakup sounds out of, and good overdrive sounds, and maybe, add a pedal in there that I really like to kind of push it into a nice lead sound. Or maybe the amp has enough distortion to get that lead sound. For a long time, I was an artist with Buddha amplification, and I really loved the SuperDrive 30. It was one of my favorite amps, and it just did everything really well. And I loved that idea that I could just go from beautiful cleans to great lead sounds and everything in between, even sometimes just utilizing my volume control on the guitar itself. So I'm going to kind of approach my preset building for this video and using the scenes and channels in that manner, using not so much switching amp models, but showing you how we can maybe mold the sound of one amp model using the channels feature, and then create a whole rig with the scenes feature in conjunction with the channels. And also, I'm going to use something else called scene controllers just to throw in kind of an alternative. So without further ado, let's go over to FM3 Edit. So what I've done here first to start off with is I've simply started with the template that I kind of start all my presets with. And anybody has any questions why I have it laid out this way, I did a video about this in the first video of this series, and you can also download this template from my website, and I'll put the link below to that. So I won't go through all the reasons why I have things the way I have them, but what I did do is I took the amp and I changed it to a Brit JM45, and I took the cab and I loaded up a 412 Brit 70s GB160B cabinet with these settings. Really didn't play much around with anything other than the normal settings I would use. So I took this JM45 amp model because I figure I can probably get everything from a nice clean sound to an edge of breakup tone, and maybe even into some overdrive. Hopefully it doesn't get too bitey and harsh, but actually that can be kind of nice on top too when we push this amp. It kind of sits nicely in the mix. So how do I set this up? Well, number one, what I would do is down here we have our channel feature. We have 4 channels. So very simply, I could start off by saying I want to set up, like I was mentioning, sort of a clean a push and maybe a pushed sound, meaning sort of edge of breakup, and then maybe an overdriven sound. So let's do this. Let's start off by just listening to what we have. Now right away on my preset, I always have this nice little mastering compressor at the end. It sounds kind of like it's working too hard right now. Yeah, way too much gain reduction. So I'm gonna bring that up just until I get about 1 or 2 dB of gain reduction. That works now. So we'll just leave that. We may have to adjust that later. So I come back over and I'm going to start off with my first channel being my cleanest tone. So I'm going to come down and see how far down I can get this to go. Obviously, we're going to lose some volume, so I'm going to come to my level control over here and bump it back up a bit. I'm okay with that. Now, obviously, just to show you what I can do here, I could even say, well, maybe I just want a little tiny bit more bottom on that, maybe a touch more presence. Okay, I'm not really working to dial in a perfect tone here. I'm more just wanting to show you how these functions can work. So let's say I'm happy with those settings. Well, what I can simply do now is just go over here with this little arrow above channel and say, I'm going to copy channel A to channel B as my starting point to move to my next channel. I'm going to switch to channel B and I'm going to say, I want to add some more input drive to this. So let's maybe jump up to 5. Now, obviously, our level has jumped. We're going to want to volume match those. I'll bring my level control at the end here down. Again, I can almost use my compressor at the end to gauge it. I'm just getting it touching the compressor on channel A, and I want to kind of get the same thing for channel B. You can see there's a little more compression there, so I'll pull this back maybe a couple more dB. Okay, we go back to our amp, channel A. So it goes from clean to kind of edge of breakup. Okay, I'm going to copy those settings. And again, I could make any other changes in here. I could add more depth to it. Let's just do that for fun. What the heck? Let's add a little bit of the depth control in. All right, just for sake of argument, I copy channel B to channel C. And I move over there, and let's just say we want to see how far we can pump this up. Let's go up to 8 on the input drive. And I want to take that depth back down and maybe add a little more presence on the top and pull the bass out a bit. Yeah, just for sake of argument. All right, so let's say that we're happy with that. I would probably come into my filter here and tilt that a little more. I'm gonna keep the tilt the same as I did on channel A for the first two. I'm gonna come up with a channel B here, and I'm going to actually tilt this. First of all, actually, let me copy my channel A settings to channel B for the same starting point. I'm gonna tilt this to about 2 dB towards the treble side. Okay, the other thing I want to do is I want to check my compressor at the end. You know, the level seems to be not too bad here. You know, it might be a hair louder, but that's okay because that's maybe what I want for my overdrive sound. So we'll leave that for now. I could easily pull that. Well, let's do this. Let's pull it back by 1 dB. Okay, so now what we've done is we've set up 3 channels on my amp. I've got my channel A, which is going to be clean. We have channel B, kind of edge of breakup, channel C, more overdrive. Okay, so simple enough now. We come up and we're on snapshot number 1. I choose channel A. I'm going to name this snapshot clean. I'm going to save this. I'm going to switch to snapshot number 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change channel of my amp to B. Okay, so now what will happen is when I go back to scene number 1, channel A on the amp is selected. When I go to scene number 2, channel B on the amp is selected, and I'll get that sort of second channel. Next, I'm going to move to snapshot 3, and I'm going to select channel C. And I'm going to name this OD, or overdrive. And actually, let's do this. Let's go back. I don't think I named scene number 2. I'm going to name that push. So now I have 3 scenes that I can access right from clean, and I'm using my foot pedal down here at the FM3 on the floor. So here's my clean. Switch over to push. And I switch over to overdrive. Now again, I might dial these sounds in different if I was really being critical about the tone, but for now, I'm just using it in this manner. Okay, so we've got this nice and workable. I want reverb on all of them. I'm going to leave that alone. So we understand now how we can have different settings on the amplifier change as channels. But let's come over here and I'm going to add an overdrive pedal to it. And I'm going to say maybe pick, I don't know, okay, I already have a T808 mod. Let's go with that. Now, first things first, I'm going to go over to scene number 1 and disengage that. Scene number 2 was already disengaged, sorry. Scene number 3, make sure it's disengaged. So it's disengaged there as well. So now I'm going to come over to snapshot number 4. And what I want for snapshot number 4 is I want to set my channel on my amp to C. And I believe I also changed this filter setting. I'm going to change that there. Did I change that over here? Also on the OD channel, I wanted to change that different filter setting as well. So I'm going to store that as well. We have to go through and make sure we make all the appropriate settings that we want to change the way we want. When I switch to scene 1, I'm going to have the 1 dB setting on the tilt EQ. Scene 2 is going to have the 1 dB setting, and now I've changed scene 3 to move to the second channel of the tilt EQ, and I want the same thing to happen for scene number 4, so we're all set. And I also have the drive engaged now. Let's hear how this drive sounds. And I'll just kind of keep this simple. I'm going to bring this tone down to 3 and maybe lower the drive just to give it a little bit of a boost. And on this scene I also, because it's going to be lead, I want to include my delay setting. All right, so what do I have here now? I have my clean, and actually before we go on, let's just name this final scene, not lead, but lead, and be done with that. Okay, so now I have 4 scenes. I have everything from clean, moving up to push, moving up to overdrive. I'll long press my controller to lead. And overall, I'm very happy now with this sort of 4-channel amp rig that I've set up with very little effort. Now, I guess the one thing that I find a little bit of a downside is the slight delay when switching. And I've tried this with the FM3 unplugged from USB and everything. And there's still that slight delay I find between switching the scenes. Is it a deal breaker? No. And if I was playing live with this, I could probably find a way to work around that so that it would pretty much be a little more seamless. Hopefully that's useful to some folks. Now there is one other thing I wanted to talk about though, and if we go up to, let's say, scene number 5, okay? I'm gonna come to the amp, and let's go back to our input drive control here. I can also right-click this, and what comes up is this edit modifier box for this particular parameter, and the source is very important here. I'm gonna pull this source and I'm gonna say scene controller 1. And I'm just gonna get out of that. Now, what'll happen is I'm now able to use something called the scene controller. You'll see the input drive just drop to 0. If I go up to my controllers, and there's a whole list of different controllers here, I'm gonna go to scene control 1 plus 2. Now with the amp, I'm trying to control the input drive. So the thing about the input drive, it won't even let me go because it's assigned to a scene controller, but this goes from 0 to 10. So if I want scene 5 to, let's say, be on 2 on the input drive setting, well, that knob goes from 0 to 10. So a setting of 2 would be 20% of the way up. So I would come to scene number 5 here, and I would put in 20%. Scene 6, maybe I want it to go to 50% or up to 5, and finally I want it to go to 80%. Now what you'll notice is when I go back to my amp and switch on these scenes, I start off with an input drive of 2, I switch, I go to an input drive of 5 on scene 6, and an input drive of 8 on scene 7, like I asked it to do over here. So we just simply right-click this and assign the controller the way that we need it to work. So that's another way. You can see how quick we could kind of access things like that. I believe there are only 4 scene controllers, so we couldn't go as in-depth if we were changing a lot of EQ parameters and whatnot. Now, of course, also channels can be used. I could set, channel D, which we aren't using at all right now. I could set that and pick a completely different amp model with whatever settings I wanted on that as well. Nothing that I've set up there, but that's what comes up. So lots of possibilities, but I think that first method, not using the scene controllers, is the way I would kind of go about most of the presets that I would use for live, especially, or in the studio, and setting up just this 4 scene setting where I have these different levels of gain, and then maybe the rest of the scenes I'm adding in different effects that I want, chorus, delay, whatever, that's obviously not in this particular preset. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I have my template preset up on my website that you guys can download for free. Just go there and grab that. I'll have the link below. I also have a couple preset packs available on the website you can take a look at there as well if you're interested, that have been getting some really good reviews from some folks who've grabbed them. So I hope that was helpful. I know I probably didn't present brand new information, but I wanted to just kind of go through my approach to doing this in hopes that maybe it'll help some folks. And like I said before, there's a lot of ways to work with the FM3 and most modelers, and there's no right and wrong. It's just so wonderful that we have so many options at our fingertips to be able to use these in a way that works best for us and sort of suits our ideals and our workflow, because workflow is such an important thing in getting things accomplished, whether we're writing music, rehearsing, recording, it doesn't matter. If we have a solid, smooth workflow, I feel the equipment should just stay out of the way and let us get to work on the really important thing of making music. So that's kind of my take on that. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please check the link below to get the template file if it's something that interests you. I thank you guys so much for watching, and like I said, I hope that was enjoyable. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think might get use out of it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I will be back very soon with some more. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Ciao for now.